Hello friends and welcome back to my channel. Today I'd actually like to talk to you about a little bit of a pet peeve of mine, and that is using photos to do consultations for piercings online. Now for those of you who aren't aware, I answer every single message I get through my website or through my DMs. Now I'm not always the fastest at answering messages, I will be honest about that, but I do always answer. It just sometimes takes me a while. And without fail, one of the most common messages that I get, like multiples a day, are people sending me pictures of their ears or of their faces going, hey, can you tell me if I have the anatomy for this piercing? And I understand why folks do that, because they don't want to have to go all the way into a studio and find out they don't have the anatomy for something, or have a piercer lie or mislead them about whether or not they have the anatomy for a particular piercing. So I get it, but it is not possible for us to determine anatomy through photos for a great many piercings. In fact, generally the most anatomy dependent piercings are the ones that we really need to see in person in order to truly assess your anatomy. And an even more concerning trend I've been seeing recently is piercers going online and charging people to do anatomy consults virtually. Piercers saying, oh, send me a picture of your ear and for 10 bucks I'll tell you if you can get an industrial or not. Or send me a picture of your genitals and I'll tell you for 40 bucks if you can get this piercing or not. And this is wild to me because this is not something that we can do, and I really do feel like these piercers are just taking advantage of people and taking their money, promising that they'll assess them for this anatomy that's not really possible to be assessed just through a picture. Now, what I mean when I say some anatomy just can't be assessed through a picture is probably best exemplified when we talk about cheek piercings. So cheek piercings are quite anatomy dependent. We want to make sure that there is a soft spot or an area that's free from any major glands, any major salivary ducts, that on the inside is going to be placed well where it's not going to be on your bite line, it's not going to hit your teeth and gums all the time. There are a lot of factors that go into having the correct anatomy for cheeks and finding the correct placement. And when we assess this anatomy, we actually look in people's mouths and we make people open and close their mouth and look at the way their jaw moves. And then we feel around in their cheeks. We get in there, we palpate, we massage the tissue. We really feel for glandular structures and things like that. Sometimes I even break out a pen light and I look and blood flow and veins through the skin. And all of these are not things that you can do with a picture. Like someone can send me a picture of their face, someone can even open their mouth and send me a picture of the inside of their mouth, and that tells me nothing. Because I need to see the jaw moving. I need to see the alignment of their bite. I need to feel the tissue of their cheeks and feel for structures that are invisible to the naked eye. And so if you just send me a picture of your face and go, can I get cheek piercings? It would be dishonest or disingenuous of me to try and give you an answer about that piercing from a photo. Another really good example of this is bridge piercings. And I talk about this in my video about bridge piercings, which I'll link here. But bridge piercing anatomy is really assessed primarily by feel. Like, yes, I'm going to look at the bridge of your nose and visually look at what's going on, but mostly I'm going to feel around. I'm going to press and feel for that tissue. And I'm feeling for a combination of the correct amount of protrusion and enough tissue over the area that's viable for me to place a piercing in. And just sending me pictures of your nose really doesn't tell me what that tissue is going to feel like and if it's going to be viable to pierce or not. Because you might have great protrusion, but there might be barely any skin there, barely any tissue there. It's not going to be a viable piercing. You might have not the best protrusion visually, but when I feel your bridge, there is like an insane amount of tissue. It is super pierceable, super viable. And this is not something that we can just determine, again, from pictures. This is anatomy that we have to feel to assess. So to just take a picture and send it off to a piercer, it's just not going to work for those. Other piercings are limited in how much information we can get from pictures. Industrials are a great example of this. But basically, with industrials, we need to look for both helix ridges to come up high enough to support us placing a piercing in them and have enough cartilage that we can place a piercing in them and be stable. And then that ridge in the middle of the ear where your flat would go, that needs to be low enough to not run into the bar. And yeah, you can send me pictures of your ear, and sometimes people send me pictures of ears and I get an ear like this, and it's pretty easy for me to go, hey, an industrial is not going to work out. Like there's nowhere for me to put it. There's no helix ridges. It's just totally flat on that outer edge. But most of the time, photos just don't give me enough information because that really needs to be assessed in person. I need to look at the ear from a variety of different angles, look up underneath the ear, see how that flat ridge is going to look. Sometimes I even need to take calipers and measure the ear and really get a feel for where we could potentially place this piercing and how it's going to interact with their ear. And it's so difficult to discern this through photos. I will have a client send me a picture of their ear and I will look at it and go, oh my God, that's going to be a perfect industrial ear. And they come in person, and it's only when I'm in person and I'm looking at the ear physically in a three-dimensional space and not just a picture that I see, oh, actually, like this ridge is not stable enough. Or sometimes it takes me feeling the ear. Sometimes it looks super stable and pierceable in a photo, and then they come in person and I touch their ear and it's actually a completely fused cartilage ridge and I can't pierce through it. And other times I look at people's ears in pictures and I go, I don't know if this is going to work out. Like, come in and we'll see. And I'm really nervous about it because it looks like in photos and in the lighting in those images and the angle of those images, like the flat is totally going to get in the way of the piercing. And then they come in person and it's like the most perfect industrial ear I've ever seen. And it's amazing and it's wonderful. And it's like the easiest industrial I've done in ages. You just can't know for sure from those pictures. A picture just doesn't tell the full story when we're talking about that piercing. And then, of course, some piercings are just unsafe for us to try and determine from photos. And genital piercings are perhaps one of the best examples of this. I will have a lot of clients who will be like, hey, can I send you some pictures and you can see if I can get this genital piercing or not? And the answer for me is always a resounding, I really need you to come in person for a consultation. Because with genital piercings, it's very similar to that case with industrials where things may kind of look very pierceable in a photo and show up in person and they're not at all. Or things may look questionable in a photo and then they show up in person and they're actually perfect for it. But with most genital piercings, there's a lot of other factors we have to consider. I not only have to consider the physical anatomy we're working with where we're piercing, but all of the anatomy surrounding it. There are factors like how the inner and outer labia sit, the way your penis rests in your pants and your clothing, like how everything lays and moves. That plays a really big factor in if we can do piercings, how we place them, and if they'll heal. There's also really big lifestyle factors to talk about when we get into genital piercings. Is this piercing going to be conducive with what you have to wear for work, what you do for work, your lifestyle? And so to tell someone through just a picture on the internet with a confident yes or no that they can get a particular piercing is just not a safe or ethical decision when it comes to a lot of these genital piercings because you just don't have the full story. And I have had multiple clients, particularly for triangle piercings, tell me that they paid piercers online up to $100 to look at a picture of their anatomy and tell them if they could get a piercing or not. And they come in to see me in person and they're super excited to get it done. And I have to be the person who breaks their heart and goes, actually, you don't have the anatomy for it. Like, yes, I can see why in a photo it might have looked like you do, but in person, there's not enough space back here for me to place a triangle. Or the way your outers and your thighs would close around it would cause irritation and migration and problems. Or they do have the anatomy for it, but we start talking and their lifestyle would never be conducive to this piercing. And it's such a bummer to have to break these clients' heart like this. And it makes me so frustrated with piercers who promise they can assess your anatomy from pictures and things like this online and take people's money to do this when it is such a disingenuous thing to do, because we really cannot assess a lot of this anatomy from a picture. And to pretend that we can is an outright lie. Now, there's definitely a lot of things that we can discern from photos. Like that example for an industrial. I feel 100% confident looking at that photo that I can say, hey, this person does not have the anatomy for this. You know, I'll have people ask me about septum piercing anatomy. Oh, can I send you a picture of my septum and you can tell me like if it's deviated or what I need to know going forward. And I'll get a lot of questions about this with septum piercings. Oh, can I send you a picture of my nose and you can tell me like what I would need to know going into getting it pierced? And a lot of times, like, most people want to know about deviations, and deviations can be pretty easy to discern from photos. Not always. Sometimes I look at a picture and I go, get that checked in person. I'm not 100%. But there are a lot of things that we can assess from pictures. So I don't want to say that it's like always completely useless to ask a piercer to check your anatomy from a picture, but I want to stress that it should be taken with a grain of salt, and I mostly want to warn people, if a piercer is promising you to do an anatomy assessment for you just from pictures, or charging you to do an anatomy assessment just from pictures, I would be very, very cautious and wary of that, because pictures just cannot give us enough information about the tissue we're working with, the anatomy we're working with, and the piercing we're gonna do. And trust me, it sucks to have a client come in, especially if they traveled from far. It was hard for them to get time off work to come to the studio, and have to tell someone, no, you can't get this piercing that you really want. My tiny light died again. I love this light so much for filming, but it will say, oh, it's got an hour of battery left, and then die on me definitely before an hour is up. And every time I tell myself I'm gonna remember that it does it and charge it sooner, and every time I don't. God dang it. Okay, we just won't have the aesthetic lighting for the rest of this video. It does suck to have to tell clients no like that and have to break clients' hearts. And I understand why that might lead to some piercers wanting to say, oh, just send me a picture, like I'll check your anatomy through this. Or if a client does send you that message, you don't want to disappoint them and not give them an answer. But it's more important that we're honest and we're straightforward. We tell people, hey, I can't check this anatomy from a picture. I wish I could help you with this. It's just not possible. And for me to promise you a yes or a no, or even a maybe on piercings off of a photo is just giving folks false hope and misleading folks about what might be doable with their anatomy. So for any very anatomy dependent piercing, please get it assessed in person by a reputable piercer. And if there is a piercer online who is promising to check your anatomy for you and charging for it, be cautious and be wary with that, folks. Thanks so much for listening to me rant about one of my biggest pet peeves. I will still always answer all of my messages, but it definitely is a bit of a pet peeve, like getting so many of these messages and having so many people say, oh, well, so-and-so piercer checks anatomy from photos. Like this person I follow on TikTok will check anatomy from pictures, and being like, oh, but that's not ethical. And also they cannot honestly tell you that you can get some of these piercings just from a photo. So please, folks, be cautious, stay safe out there, and thanks for hanging out and letting me rant about this for a little bit. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and I can't wait to chat soon. Bye.